time. For my dear on-time friends, and for those of you who'll join us late, that's fine too. Welcome to the Saugatuck Douglas Area Indivisible Monthly Meeting. I'm Jane Dickey, co-chair of this chapter of the National Organization of Indivisible. It's always risky to schedule speakers in January in Michigan. And so we are grateful for your flexibility joining us on this Zoom call for what promises to be a great program. Let your friends know who want to join that all of this will be posted on our YouTube channel within the next 2 days. And thanks to our tech guru and co-chair with me, Erin Wilkinson, for setting this up. We know how distressing the last few weeks have been, watching as this president continues to isolate us from the rest of the world and threaten military action against American citizens. And as the events with ICE unfold, if you're feeling like there's not anything you can do, we have a plan to help you channel your tough feelings, whether they're full of rage, fear, sadness, or a combination of emotions. Many of you have gone through our rapid response training, so you have a better understanding than most of what is happening nationally, including in Minnesota with the murder of Renee Good. First, it's important to know that the Department of Homeland Security, DHS, and ICE is only funded through January 30th. That's 10 days. That means we have a critical window to take action to significantly restrict ICE and ensure it doesn't get a single penny more to enable its brutality. We can put pressure on Democrats to oppose any appropriations bill that fails to restrict ICE's ability to conduct dragnet arrest operations, end Border Patrol deployments to our cities, and stop DHS from continuing to move money around to fuel ICE and Border Patrol lawlessness. What you can do, go to our website, SDA for Saugatuck Douglas Area, SDAindivisibles.org, to join the National Indivisible Phone Bank. Rapid Response Out for Good is the name of that phone banking project. This phone bank will focus on calling constituents in key states and urging them to call their senators to rein in ICE terror tactics. There you will also find an explainer to help understand what's going on and how they can get involved. But here's the rub. How do we talk to folks? We are often confronted with thoughtful, caring people who end up on the opposite side supporting ICE. Why is it so hard to change minds? And it feels even harder when the stakes are this high. This brings us to tonight's program, Opening Minds, Fostering Dialogue. This program was first offered by the Holland Zealand Indivisible chapter. It inspired us to invite Dr. David Myers and Dr. Christy Berghoef to join us to speak on these issues. Their understanding of human behavior and their research-based tools will help us first to understand what forces shape our views, and then to use evidence-based approaches to open minds, build trust, and foster more meaningful dialogue across differences. It's my pleasure to introduce two compassionate, brilliant scholars. David Myers will speak first, followed by Christy Berghoef. David Myers is the consummate teacher, first teaching popular courses in psychology at Hope College and winning the prestigious Hope Professor Educated Award, selected by students. He has gone on to teach the world psychology. He is the author of the best-selling intro psych textbook in the world, translated into multiple languages. Written beautifully, students share it just because it's so interesting. Fun fact, because he followed the scientific evidence on sexual orientation and gender and reported it in his textbooks, Florida tried to ban all AP Psych students from getting credit if the high school continued to use his texts. The high schools refused, and David refused to change a word. This was a battle won. Florida continues to use Dave's texts. Students continue to be led to compassionate understanding. I am fortunate to call him one of my best friends and a warrior for a just world. I don't know Christy Berghoef as well, but I do know that she is well respected across the country. Christy is a writer, speaker, musician, contemplative photographer, civil discourse consultant, globe-trotting backpacker, and gardener. And if that isn't enough to make you love her already, she leads groups on pilgrimages and contemplative retreats and is the author of 2 memoirs, Rooted and Cracking the Pot. Her blog, Wheat and Willow, has many followers. I think you'll see why both of these folks are well worth listening to. After the presentations, there'll be time for questions. Now, if clapping on Zoom worked, I'd invite you all to warmly welcome David Myers and Christy Berghoef. Perhaps just a wave of your hands will do. So if we wave a welcome to Dave and Christy. David.
Oh, thank you, Jane. And Jane is likewise one of my dearest, closest, longest standing friends, whom I am proud to have played some role in bringing her here to the Holland-Saugatuck area. And I'm delighted to be, excuse me, on this tag team tonight with Christy Berghoef. As you'll see, I'm the data geek guy, and Christy's going to take us into some deeper levels of understanding and inspiration. So I've been invited to share with you some reflections on how we can engage people who differ from us and be effective in our political persuasion. First thing I'd suggest is who not to engage. For me, that's people I dearly love who are on the other side of the fence. Good people, family members, and that family relationship is just more important than a political argument. So I'm not going to go there. And there's also people with very strong views that are not going to be persuaded. 1 in 3 Americans think it's just fine that the ICE officer shot Renee Good through an open car door window twice in the face. Those people aren't going to be convinced. But you don't need to convince those people, and I don't either, because if just 2% of voters in the last election had switched sides, there would have been a different outcome and a different world history right now being written. Who we can reach out to and focus our energies on are low information potential voters, people who are ignorant of some of the realities that I'm about to show you, and those who are on the fence or mild in their views. Let's take a look at current public opinion about the president from the best public opinion survey from the University of Chicago related National Opinion Research Center just this last week, which showed that 20% strongly approve and 20% somewhat approve the president. 1% don't have much leaning. 12% somewhat disapprove, and 47% strongly disapprove. There's 3 things to note about this. First, it is really interesting and unusual that only 1% of people don't have an opinion. Everybody has an opinion. Secondly, of those who vote in off-year elections, which will be coming up in 9.5 months, it's those with strong views, such as the 80 people on this call with us right now, who are most likely to vote. And as you can see, the disapproving of Trump has a more than 2-to-1 advantage right now at this moment in time, which, along with some other early election reports, is what makes the Democratic Party very hopeful for a sea change election next fall. Third, if you are trying to persuade people to the positions that I would normally associate with indivisible, your target audience is those 1% plus the 20% who are tending to approve, but not strongly, of the president's actions. If you're on the other side and you're trying to persuade people to the MAGA way of thinking, you've got a smaller potential target audience of about 13% who might potentially be persuaded. So what can we do? How do we persuade? One thing we can do is inform people. And what I'm about to share with you suggests the need not for indoctrination, but for information and education. This is really a time of just staggering misinformation. I'm reminded of the words of St. Paul long ago, for the time is coming when people will turn away from listening to the truth and wander away to myths. Let me show you some myths. First, just preface by this reminder that indeed lies spread faster than truth. Falsehoods spread with amazing speed. Jonathan Swift had the idea some years ago a lie can spread halfway around the world while truth is putting on its shoes. So, 4 examples here of significant misinformation, significant both in the magnitude of the misinformation and its consequences. First is people's perceptions of crime. Every year, the Gallup organization asks Americans, is there more crime in your area this year than there was a year ago or less? And every year, as you can see, about 7 in 10 Americans say there's more crime this year than there was last year. Last year, they said there was more crime that year than the year before. And thus, the president could say, the murder rate is the highest it's been in 47 years. We have blood, death, and suffering on a scale once unthinkable. So elect me and we'll be safe again. When in fact, the FBI aggregated crime rates from local law enforcement agencies shows that this is an era of relatively low and decreasing both violent and property crime. We can look at that from a different perspective too. National surveys by the National Crime Victimization Survey out of the Bureau of Justice Statistics showing the rate of violent and of property crime victimizations over that time. People perceive crime going up. In actuality, crime is going down. And generally, people tend to tell you that my town and neighborhood are safe, healthy places. Hey, Saugatuck is safe. But the rest of America, the cognitively available America that we see on TV, it's getting scary worse. And if you do not understand what is true, that has dramatic consequences politically. Those who believe the myth that the crime rates are at a near, or who believe that crime rates are at a near or all-time high, voted overwhelmingly Republican in the last election, while those who understood the truth that that is a false statement by a landslide voted Democrat. What you know matters. Second example is immigrant criminality. Oh, the nation has been overrun by the Biden migrant crime wave. When the president was in Michigan during the campaign, he said immigrants will walk into your kitchen, they'll cut your throat. There's an invasion of savage criminals and so forth. It's in their genes, they're animals. We're hearing even today in this press conference about Somalians kind of being violent criminals that are overtaking the nation and voting illegally in election. And then, of course, there's the case of certain cases, such as of Laken Riley, a young woman who was killed by a Venezuelan immigrant and whose blood was on Joe Biden's hands. Immigrant crime, and I'm going to protect you from all that immigrant crime. And it's not just the president who felt this way. 57% of Americans, including an overwhelming portion of Republicans, agreed that the large number of migrants seeking to enter the U.S. is leading to more crime. Well, what are the facts? Are immigrants often criminals? The respectably conservative Wall Street Journal says that's a myth, as does the Libertarian Cato Institute, noting that with few exceptions, immigrants are less crime prone than natives. And let's look at some of the data here. Here's the incarceration rate of undocumented immigrants versus native-born Americans. And the Stanford Economic Policy Research Institute has done its own analysis and concluded that the likelihood of an immigrant being incarcerated is 60% lower than of people born in the United States. Immigrant crime is low, but it's perceived to be high, and those who think it's high vote differently from those who understand what is true. And in fact, the 2024 crime data shows that the crime has dropped mostly, especially in cities that have received the most immigrants. New York City, for example, has a lot of immigrants and a low crime rate, despite what's perceived. Two more examples of kind of false beliefs about the world around us. Economic examples. Has unemployment worsened? At the time of the 2016 election, 67% of Trump voters said unemployment had increased during the Obama administration. Two-thirds thought unemployment had gone up. That is what happened to unemployment during that time. Let me just go back to that slide for a moment. And in 2022, Americans were asked, when it comes to the economy, are we experiencing more job growth than usual? Yes or no? Only 19% in 2022 said yes. Even most Democrats said the answer to that was only 19%, oh, excuse me, only 31% of Democrats said yes. Here's what actually had happened to employment and job growth during that time period. It was, in fact, a period of time in which more jobs were created in 1 year than ever before in the history of the United States. And yet, only 19% of America thought there was more job growth than usual. And during that time period, the unemployment rate had come sharply down from 6% to 3.5%. In August, a year before the last presidential election, the unemployment rate was 3.8%, which was close to a 50-year low. But would you believe, Americans found, the national survey found that 51% wrongly believed that unemployment was nearing a 50-year high. This just staggers me. How could people's perceptions of economic reality be so askew from what is actually the case? And is inflation increasing or decreasing? Americans just shortly before the election were overwhelmingly seeing inflation is increasing. But in fact, that is what was happening to inflation during the previous 2 years. And again, what you think matters. If you understood that inflation was declining over the last year, you overwhelmingly voted Democratic. If you did not understand that true statement as true, you, by a decided margin, voted Republican. So whether we understand the truth matters. Education and information matters. My last example is whether or not the 2020 election was, as the president continues to tell us every day, rigged. 78% of Trump voters thought that Biden did not legitimately win the 2020 election. And why was that? Well, it was a few reasons. One was that there was massive numbers of dead people who voted in 2020. Now, in response to this, you've often heard it said that, well, that was never been proven that there was election fraud. But actually, we can say something much more than that. That's a weak argument. Let me show you some data that shows us that God knows that actually Trump lost. And here is some pertinent data. First, are there dead people who voted? The Michigan Secretary of State says she's not aware of a single such case in the state of Michigan. Well, of course she'd say that. You might say she's a Democrat. But hey, these voter names and addresses are public. You can go to City Hall just a block and a half from where I'm sitting at Hope College, look up the voters, tell me who are the dead ones. Likewise, we can ask whether non-citizens have voted in great numbers. Is it the case, as has been alleged, that undocumented immigrants have, by the hundreds of thousands, poured across our borders so that they could vote in our elections? They're so desperate to do so. Well, their names are on the rolls in Allegan County and Ottawa County. Who are they? Just tell me who they are, because everything's public. An initial review, the New York Times reported last week, found actually there was no widespread illegal voting by migrants, as you might expect. By the way, that's a criminal offense because you have to certify that you're a citizen when you vote. One analysis of 176,000 voters in a Florida county whose clerk was appointed by Governor DeSantis and who checked those 176,000 against Homeland Security citizen registers found a grand total of 15 non-citizen voters on those rolls among the 176,000, of whom some were incorrectly registered, put on that list when in fact they had not registered to vote. and others were new citizens whose information had not yet been recorded. So there was effectively none out of 176,000. I mean, no more than you have fingers on a hand. It just doesn't happen. But consider one more thing that I bet you've not thought of, and that is the what I call the omnipresence of the voting shift from 2016 to 2020. It's distributed across it didn't just happen in Detroit and New York City and certain Democratic strongholds, it happened everywhere. Democrats gained in nearly every battleground state, running up margins in cities, rural areas, and so forth. Here is in our region of the country, the upper Midwest, the party shift from the presidential vote in 2012 to 2016. And as you can see, it's predominantly in a Republican direction, as you'd expect, from the last Obama election to the Clintons' loss to Donald Trump. Now, here's the voting shift in 2020 from the prior 2016 election. The Democrats in most of these counties, as you can see, got a higher percentage of the vote. Let's just take this local. I looked up the data so you don't have to. In Ottawa County, in 2020, Joe Biden did 9.5% better than did Hillary Clinton in 2016. That's Ottawa County with a Republican clerk, by the way. In Allegan County, also with a Republican clerk counting the vote, the Democratic shift was plus 4%. In Kent County, again, a Republican vote counter, it was plus 9%. There's 1,700 counties across the United States where in most of which this vote shift occurred. 175,000 precincts. If there's a conspiracy theory that could make that happen, that could lead all these Democrat and Republican vote counters across 1,700 plus counties in the United States to shift their votes in the Democratic direction without any information about that ever being disclosed, tell me how that could have happened. And finally, consider what I think is the more interesting question, and that is, why in 2020 did Donald Trump so significantly outperform the polls? You may think that the polls were right in 2020 because they suggested Biden would win. But actually, it was a really bad year for opinion polling because the average opinion poll result just before the election was an 8% Biden victory, when in fact the result was only a 4% Biden victory. That polling, which sampled the nation, was off. What happened at the end? Well, if there's any conspiracy, it might be why was there a Republican shift from the last polls to the result? So there's widespread misinformation, people believing things that aren't true, and that has consequences. What's the explanation? Thomas Friedman thinks a good place to look for information are the disciplines of psychology and anthropology. And you won't be surprised to know that I think he's right. There are a number of things that can help explain this, for everything from fake news to the disposition of people to believe what they're told, whether it's true or not, the amazing power of repetition, which we've demonstrated in many, many experiments, other phenomena that I could gladly tell you about in conversation, but I want to save time for Christy. So let me emphasize just one powerful principle that we know as the availability heuristic. So if you've taken psych recently, you know about this. If you've taken psych 20 years ago, you probably aren't familiar with this powerful concept. A heuristic is a simple cognitive rule of thumb. And the availability heuristic is our human tendency to judge the likelihood of an event by the ease with which instances of it come to mind. That is, the extent to which there are readily available examples of something. So, let me just give you an example. Guns in schools. Kids are dying because of kids getting slaughtered in mass shootings in schools, such as happened at Parkland, in Parkland down in Florida, leading a majority of U.S. teens, thanks to that vivid example, which is readily available in their cognition, to fear that a shooting could happen at their school. Most parents share their concern. A little less so today than wasn't the case the 2 or 3 years previously. But a majority of teachers were worried about a school shooting. Billions of dollars have been spent to secure schools and to equip guards and everything to protect our children at schools. Every time a new school shooting grips the country, parents contend with a renewed sense of foreboding about sending their children into school. Even though the statistical reality is, because people don't appreciate how many schools there are in the United States, that more children have died from lightning strikes than school shootings in the past 20 years. One Harvard risk expert calculated that the 1 in 600 million odds of a child's being shot and killed on any given school day are far lower than almost any other mortality risk a kid faces, including traveling to and from school, playing sports, guns in the homes. Hey, it's not that we don't want our schools to be safe, but if we want our kids to be safe, there are a lot of other things, including just driving around in cars, that put kids much more at risk. My Harvard colleague, Steve Pinker, when asked, what is the one thing wrong with the world that you would change and why? It's changing this cognitive bias, thanks to the availability heuristic, their tendency to think in terms of anecdotes and images rather than data and facts. So part of our challenge is to teach the availability heuristic. The plural of anecdote is not data. Show me the evidence, show me the data, and help people to understand what the truth is. Because the evidence, the statistics sound like dry stuff, but really they're just a collection of a huge number of anecdotes. They're everybody's lives. But the problem persists. And so one Afghan immigrant kills a National Guard person in Washington, D.C., and we have this wave of anti-Afghan hostility fomented by the president and those who follow him. If we had one retired accountant kill somebody, would we have a wave of hostility toward retired accountants? I mean, we could justifiably just as much. So the psychology of persuasion involves both our needing to have ways to persuade, and I'm first suggesting that information does matter. Education really does help. By the way, we have some new research published in Science Magazine just recently on how conversations with artificial intelligence bots can help people see truth. And what I prepared to hand out if we were meeting in face to face was some handouts that were morphs to the rest of my talk here. And they are going to be put by Erin online for anybody who's attending if they want to see them, about how to have honest conversations and about persuasive strategies that are effective, how to listen to people, not just waiting our turn to talk, but listening to them and reflecting what they're thinking and then what you're thinking, and how to phrase that in a spirit of humility that can help other people listen. But if there's one from these various persuasion principles, one principle that's really important, it's not just trying to win an argument, but it's trying to influence what people are thinking for themselves with an audience-focused strategy that focuses less on winning that argument, less on crushing one's opponent, than on helping them think for themselves and appreciate and embrace what the truth is. Kamala Harris had an opportunity to do this in answer to the first question in the presidential debate. I'm going to begin tonight, said David Muir, with the issue voters say repeatedly is the #1 issue, and that's the economy. So, Vice President Harris, what do you think? Are people in the country better off than they were 4 years ago? When it comes to the economy, do you believe Americans are better off than they were 4 years ago? That was a 16-inch softball question for which she might have answered, that's a very good question. And what if she were following the principles of helping people rehearse for themselves, she wouldn't just answer the question, she would ask people whether they think America was better off 4 years ago when unemployment was much higher than with in the years since with 1.6 million or excuse me, 16 million new jobs added. Were we better off 4 years ago or today with the stock market and our retirement accounts up 50%? Were we better off 4 years ago with a higher crime rate than there is today or today with its lower crime rate? There was a series of ways in which she could have helped people think their way through that question. Instead, she rambled off unrelated to the question that was asked on a little campaign spiel, and it was just my heart just sank. It was such an enormous missed opportunity. Well, you've heard enough from me to kind of be the warm-up act for my partner, Christy Berghoef, who's going to talk to us a little bit about toxic tribalism. And I just want to say, Christy's absolutely right that this is a toxic time. Public trust in government is near an all-time low. The number of people who don't just dislike, but hate those in the other party, look at your own feelings, I look at mine, is at a record high. The number of people who say people in the other party are more immoral, dishonest, closed-minded is at, has gone up sharply. No surprise to most of you listening, probably. And many Americans express not just frustration, but anger when they think about what's happening and how they feel about the other party. There's a new book out on how people can make and create social change. And the authors were asked recently, what could you do to help people apply these ideas? And a couple of their answers were, well, first of all, just take action together. Creating community is the building block of social change. So I bet most of you have attended one of the No Kings rallies and felt encouraged and supported and uplifted by the community of people that you're part of, even as you are on this call this afternoon or this evening. And change takes time. So take the view that change may be coming. Take the long view. And in fact, the deepest optimists among us right now think that what's happening now is so bad that it's setting the stage for revolutionary and enduring change to come in our upcoming elections and all that's going to follow for years to come. Trump is getting weaker. His numbers are going down. Public opinion is changing. And if I could just close with a couple kind of biblical admonitions, be patient until the coming of the Lord. The farmer waits for the precious crop from earth, being patient with it until it receives the earth in the early and the late rains. You also must be patient. And I'm about to do a new thing. Now it springs forth. Do you not perceive it? When I look at long-term trends and trends in public opinion in response to what's happening right now, I'm actually encouraged and optimistic, even though I'm terribly distressed about some of the particularly climate destroying actions that are being taken in the short run. So that's my 2 cents. And now I'm going to unshare my screen and hand the screen to my partner, Christy Berghoef.
All right. Thank you, David. Let me get my screen up.
Thank you, David. Jane, can I just, before Christy starts, Jane, was your intention to have questions after both our speakers or in between speakers?
At the end. So if you have questions, to remember them, jot them down in paper in front of you, and we will then have questions and comments from you all who are participating afterwards.
Okay, and also if I could add, if you have questions, put them into chat as well, and that way we can document them and we can relay them as well, if that's helpful.
All right. Well, thanks for showing up here tonight, everyone. I'm guessing you decided to come here tonight because maybe you're feeling frustrated, exhausted, beat down, discouraged, defeated, depressed. I know I've cycled through all of those things. Well, I've been doing this civil discourse stuff for over a decade now. And in the beginning, I was just kind of handing people tools to take with them into dialogue. And as time went on and as the toxicity began to rise, I began to realize there's really this important need for us to just understand what's beneath all that and what's leading to that, because that can really kind of help us get it at the core. So let's start here. We're going to start, I'm going to talk about toxic tribalism. What is it and why does it matter? Well, belonging is critical for human flourishing. So tribalism itself is not bad. We're born with this need to belong to community. Tribes have played an important role in human survival, actually, throughout human history. But toxic tribalism is detrimental to the human experience. And so what is it and why is it such a problem? So there are a lot of different definitions, a lot of ways people define toxic tribalism. This is the one I'm drawn to. I think it really hits something important. Toxic tribalism is a loyalty to one's own tribe or social group to the point that dogma, dysfunction, and irrationality become the standard, often leading to the demonization and dehumanization of rival groups. So we have this chaos within our group, and that chaos gets reflected outward, bringing chaos into the world. And a couple keywords here, demonization and dehumanization. So demonization is kind of when we begin to categorize other people in the way that we think of them as being other, we think of them as wicked or evil or bad or threatening. But then dehumanization is when those thoughts and words lead to a process of actually stripping individuals or groups of their human qualities, treating them as less than human, denying them moral consideration, viewing them as animals or objects or infestations. And we have certainly heard a lot of this kind of rhetoric about immigrants from our administration. Dehumanization has led to all manner of atrocities throughout human history, and you see some listed here on your screen. Dehumanizing narratives are always the seeds for the justification of these kind of atrocities. If we repeatedly talk about a people group in subhuman terms, we'll not be shocked at all when we begin to treat them in subhuman ways. So think of how ingrained and normalized the dehumanizing narratives had to have been, for example, for people to allow enslaved women to be bred like animals, whipped when they weren't compliant, and then have their children ripped from their arms and sold off to the highest bidder. We can ask this question in any of these examples listed on this screen, and it's not an exhaustive list, obviously. But the thing is, the way we talk about people matters. The stories we tell about people matter. Our words have weight in this world. And as a writer, I've been feeling deeply compelled right now to be telling human stories that rise up in the midst of the inhumane treatment we're seeing. The characteristics of a toxic tribe. So number one, the leader cannot be questioned. We're seeing this today too, I would say. Number two, the louder you repeat the tribal message, the greater your reward. So for example, in the context of US politics, being loyal to the president may result in high power cabinet positions rather than experience or qualification leading to these things. Number three, if you question the tribe, you're punished or banished by the tribe. And again, I don't mean to just pick on the Republican Party, but the answers are so obvious right now. We look at someone like Mike Pence or Marjorie Taylor Greene, our own former Congressman Fred Upton. These are people who questioned or who did not get fully behind their political leaders, and they were punished for it, and they were ostracized. They were labeled rhinos. And I know even if we think smaller, I meet with a lot of people in the area, and I hear so many stories of people who have lost friends, people who've been disconnected from family for the same reason, because they've questioned something within their tribe. Number four, blame shifting. A toxic tribe will always blame the other party or some outside group for anything that is wrong, and they will refuse to take accountability. And I would say that both Republicans and Democrats do this all the time. It drives me nuts. Always blaming the other party if the economy is bad, taking credit if the economy is good, for example. And both parties do this. Number 5, confirmation bias. And David touched on this a bit. And this is essentially that we can only accept information and data and statistics that support what we already believe to be true. It's almost as if I picture there's sort of a channel in our brain that gets cut. This is what we believe to be true, and the only thing that can funnel in is the information that fits in that tunnel, if that makes sense. And then we tend to ignore any evidence or data that doesn't align with our beliefs. Number 6, we only trust the information that is in our silos. So we surround ourselves, and social media has exacerbated this problem, but we surround ourselves with like-minded people, and we slap terms like fake news, fake science, fake history on anything we disagree with. Initially, we saw Trump kind of popularizing this term, but I hear it everywhere. I hear it from people all around me all the time now who don't like something. Then they say, well, it's fake. It's not real. Number 7, a toxic tribe views outsiders as dangerous, as threats. And so we're repeatedly told by the leaders of a toxic tribe to be afraid of different ideas, to be afraid of different religions, to be afraid of different races. These are people to be afraid of. So what I want you to get from this, and what I hope you can get from this bit, is asking people to change their political views is very hard, because especially if they're in a toxic tribal setting, a shift in worldview can sometimes mean separation from family or friends, and perhaps that is the only belonging they've ever known. So I think it's just important to be aware of this as we enter these hard conversations. Just a few words on technology and the media that also enhance toxic tribalism. So number 1 is just that social media promotes these echo chambers. So we join groups of like-minded people, and we're exposed to, again, what we already believe to be true. So we're continually reminded of how right we are, how good we are, how bad the other is, how wrong the other is. So our views, whether they're right or wrong, are constantly reinforced and rarely challenged when we stay in these echo chambers. And number 2, algorithms. When we experience this sense of being right or winning an argument, our brain is flooded with a chemical, these endorphins, and it's a feel-good chemical that gives us kind of this high. You get that if you go out for a run or you get some exercise of some sort. And technology is very sneaky and very smart, and it knows how to feed our endorphins. And it knows if it keeps us feeling high, we'll keep coming back for more, and that is to their profitable end. Content amplification and rage bait. The most extreme views get the most shares and the most likes, and David mentioned this as well. This is what tends to blow up online. This is what goes crazy. And in fact, there's a new term this year. It's one of the sort of phrases of the year. It's rage bait. I had never heard of this till a couple months ago, but this is just that reality that social media rewards rage bait. So the angrier you make people, the more they keep coming back, and the more your posts are shared and liked. And then the last one, just remember that to keep in mind that media companies are profiting tremendously off making us fearful of each other, off making us hate each other. And the more we do this, the higher their profit margin. So they really aren't in the business to bring about change and community. They're in it for the profits. So what? Well, the consequences of toxic tribalism and fear-based messaging are far-reaching. Number one, violence and genocide always begin with toxic tribalism. Dehumanizing people leads to inhumane treatment of people. The second thing, toxic tribalism weakens societies. So when we focus our energy on hating the other person, on wanting to be right, on winning an argument, we become incapable of living together harmoniously. And then the third thing, when our politicians demonize each other, which we're seeing in my lifetime, I've never seen it this bad. And I used to work on Capitol Hill, and I thought it was bad then. It's nothing compared to what I'm seeing now. And when they do this to each other, when they're focusing on demonizing each other and making sure everyone knows how terrible the other party is, they're not focusing on the issues at hand. They're becoming incapable of working together. We're seeing this today. They're incapable of working towards the flourishing of the citizens of this country and the world. This is happening right now, again, in a way that I have never seen it in my lifetime. I don't think I ever imagined it could be this bad. And then finally, the demonization and perpetuation of false narratives about other tribes. It trickles down into our streets. We see our politicians talking this way about each other, but now everyone in the streets, our neighbors, are talking this way about each other. It has harmful consequences, and we see instances of violence because these narratives have been believed. So when I think about toxic tribalism, a goal that I feel compelled to work towards is to move away from toxic tribalism and foster a greater sense of communal belonging. And I love to think about it in those terms rather than tribes, just because tribal has gotten such a bad rap. I like to think of communal belonging. And here's what I mean by that. So characteristics of communal belonging. First, there's a sense of belonging. There's a community that is healthy, fosters a sense of belonging around shared values or traditions or goals. We're all part of different little communities that we have shared interest in. The second one, mutual support. A healthy community fosters camaraderie and collective responsibility and support for each other. Number three, a healthy community has room for individualism. Diversity is seen as a blessing, not a burden. Diversity adds richness and texture and depth to our community. So all the voices are welcome around the table. The fourth one is critical thinking. And Dave mentioned this as well, that there's, we're not doing too well around critical thinking these days, but in a communal belonging sense, there's space here for healthy, informed debate. So a healthy tribe cares more about what is right than it cares about being right. And there's a big difference there. And I would just say, a reminder that disagreement within a social group is often a reflection of thoughtfulness and critical thinking, and that there are discernment skills within this group. Number five, and this is a big one, other groups and tribes and communities should be approached with curiosity rather than conflict. So what I mean by that is we have these ideas in our group. That group over there has their ideas. Well, let's communicate, because in this sense, we can talk with other tribes. That's nothing to be afraid of. We don't draw our weapons. We're curious. We really want to know. We want to understand. And, if our tribe is internally healthy, if we've learned healthy habits, we'll be able to enter dialogue with other tribes in a more realistic and clear-headed way, and with a genuine curiosity just to understand them. So this is a very general picture of toxic tribalism and communal belonging. And I know to look, you see this screen in front of you, and I don't think we necessarily go all the way from toxic tribalism to communal belonging on all of these things. I think each arrow you see there's a place that's healthy, and I don't know what it is. I'm still learning, but I don't think we necessarily go all the way, because there can be some harm in that. But in general, toxic tribalisms are more exclusive. You have to be just like this in order to belong. Whereas communal belonging has more of an inclusive vibe about it. So different people can come, share your ideas. It's okay. Toxic tribalism has a real confirmation bias problem. So again, we only allow certain information to come in. We decide which information is true, which is not. It's what we tell you it is. Whereas in a sense of communal belonging, there is this authentic curiosity. I want to understand things. I'm going to ask questions. I'm going to ask the hard questions of my own tribe, of other tribes. Toxic tribalism tends to be authoritarian led. There is a one or small group of people that determine what happens in that tribe, what that tribe looks like, how people believe, how we talk. Whereas in a communal belonging, there's more of a shared leadership. Toxic tribalism has a mistrust of outsiders. A communal belonging would say, hey, outsiders are welcome. These are our values. Come and talk with us. In toxic tribalism, we have, again, that kind of binary thinking. And so that is just a very black and white thinking. There is good, which is, of course, always us. There's bad, which is always them. There's right, there's wrong. There's a light and there's darkness. And a holistic thinking sees that nothing is quite that simple. There's a lot of complexity. There's a lot of nuance, and there's room for that. So I want to just close with these 4 rules. Daniel Dennett, he was a philosopher and a cognitive scientist. He passed away actually this past year. And he had this lovely list of 4 rules, and they became known as Daniel Dennett's 4 rules. And this is for engaging with someone with whom we disagree. And they go in this order. And I will tell you that I have these things on my refrigerator, and I think this is a good list to tape to your mirror or, stick on your fridge, wherever. So number 1, the first thing you should do is re-express your opponent's position clearly. And so you should say what Daniel says. He says you should be able to re-express your opponent's position so clearly and so vividly and so fairly that he or she says, well, thanks. I wish I had thought of putting it that way. And I know we've all been in that situation where that hasn't been done. And we probably have many instances that we could name where we haven't done it. But I think of, for example, the Black Lives Matter movement. I had a sticker on my laptop, and it was a Black Lives Matter sticker. And someone came to me in the coffee shop and said, you hate the police. And I said, no, I don't. But do you want to sit down and have a conversation about it? I don't think you actually understand the movement or understand my position at all. So that's just an example of not doing that. The second thing, list any points of agreement, especially if they're not matters of general or widespread agreement. And you can ask me if we have time afterwards. I have some interesting abortion views, and I don't really fit nicely into either party. And it always, it's interesting when I say to someone on the right, oh, I agree with that bit, and they don't even have a category for it. So list any points of agreement you have, because that can serve to really diffuse the hot air. And the third thing, you should mention anything that you've learned from your opponent. Ego can get in the way all the time. It's very hard if you're in a heated debate or someone that, you very much disagree with to say, oh, yeah, I actually didn't know that. I wasn't aware of that statistic, or I didn't know. So that's really, really helpful and a healthy thing to be able to do. Then fourth, only after you have done these things, then are you permitted to say so much as a word of rebuttal or criticism. So these things really just kind of help cut through the toxicity, and they remove a defensiveness. And this can be done on social media too, but it's extremely, just a tough arena, I think, to have these kind of conversations in. But yeah, so I just keep those 4 points with you. And listen, I would say that, just to close my bit here, that politics has become a really dirty word in this country. And I think it's on the precipice of even becoming a dangerous thing to talk politics. But politics is really important because politics is how we decide how we're going to live together. That's what politics is. That's it. It's how we decide how we're going to live together. Why are we fighting the way we're fighting? We all are after a certain kind of world, I believe. So we just have to learn to sit down and have meaningful dialogue, engage in thoughtful ways, because I think it's really important that we reclaim this space. So that's all I have here for you.
So I think at this point, we will be open to questions. And I think, Erin, are you going to facilitate that?
I believe Jen is actually going to facilitate that.
Okay. You're meeting a new person, a wonderful member of our steering committee, Jen Reese.
I don't actually see where Jen went. Did she fall off? Well, I'll tell you what, we'll start with the question that is
Oh, sorry. I
the-
didn't realize I was muted. Sorry.
You're good. Go ahead.
I only do this for a living. What I was going to suggest is if there's any questions to raise your hand or put them into chat, and we can just lob them over to both our speakers, which were great, by the way. Thank you.
And let me just say that I'd be very open also to hearing some discussion, any reactions or comments or suggestions in response.
I was starting to say we do have one question in the chat that's happening on the side here, and it says tribalism exists because it's a way to feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
To be outside of the tribe is viewed as unsafe. For many, it's a scary choice to make and takes courage. How can we encourage others to be courageous?
Yeah. So for me, in my experience, and I say this to people, and I talk with a lot of people who are in the situation where they're in a toxic tribe, their whole social community is in this toxic tribe, their church is in the tribe, their family, their spouse often. And I always encourage people to take the brave step of saying something, asking a question, something, because you will find out every single time. I promise you, you will find out that you are not alone. You are not the only one. Often, the more toxic a tribe is, the more people tend to hold close what they're actually thinking. If they have questions, they're not going to ask. And if they have different ideas, they're not going to share them. And almost always, it is the case that when someone just takes a step, questions something within the tribe, or expresses, "Oh, I appreciate this about something else," people will suddenly surround you, and you'll have these conversations with people that are so rich and unbelievable because it turns out, oh, they were also feeling that way, but thought they were alone. So it is
Christy?
almost across the board has been my experience in talking with people.
Christy, if I could build on that.
Yeah.
In the chat link, there's in the chat bar, there's a link to an essay I posted on the surprising satisfactions of honest conversations.
Mm.
And this talks about work by my University of Chicago colleague, Nick Epley, who puts people together. Sometimes they're marital couples to raise and discuss some issues that you just haven't had the courage to bring up. And people are nervous about having awkward conversations. They may be across political differences. But what he overwhelmingly finds is that people actually, when they've done this, and especially when they follow Dennett's 4 rules, you might say, find it to be a really rewarding, satisfying, growth-producing thing. So that research really encourages us to take the risk to reach
Mhm.
out and initiate those difficult conversations.
Yeah.
So there are a couple questions coming in. If Christy, if you didn't have anything to add to that, I think there's a really good question here. So a lot of what you both presented, like your story, Christy, about, being in the coffee shop and someone sat down with you. So how can some of this be done over social media?
So I think social media can be a very hard place to have really thoughtful discussions. You're always going to have those people who jump in and they really aren't there because they want to have a discussion. Usually those are the people that jump in right away and just say something that isn't true or, make really out there statements. But I have experienced some conversations on Facebook, and often I kind of have to go through the Daniel Dennett things, right? And say, oh, I really appreciate this thing you said. Here's how I see it. And this is my understanding, and this is the research that I've seen or the data that I've seen. And there are ways to kind of get that going, but I think always consider that the manner in which you engage someone can be just as impactful in the things you're saying. So I think always go in with a sense of humility, go in with the sense of, I'm really curious. I want to understand your position that I so very much disagree with. And sometimes you'll find then that people have to leave a conversation. They can't even handle the idea of a person on the other side saying something nice about them or because they have a narrative and now I will be just upfront and honest that I identify more with the Democratic Party, and so maybe that was obvious anyway. But I um, I have had people who are engaging with me, and I'll say something like, "Oh, well, I appreciate that you said that," and I can see that's coming from a really great place, and they can't handle that because their narrative of a Democrat is that I'm a terrible, evil, horrible person. So immediately I break down this narrative that they have of Democrats and of me. So I know that the rage can build on social media and you can just want to slam down on people, but I recommend just take a deep breath and be really careful in your approach because, as I said, you're helping to shape the narrative and sometimes enforce the narrative they have about who you are when you engage in a certain way.
And, and Christy, there's actually some national organizations now that are structuring those conversations. Braverangels.org, braverangels.org is one such that brings together Reds and Blues across America for weekend retreats to understand each other better. At the end of the weekend, the goal is not to all walk out agreeing, but often to discovering that the differences are not as great as maybe they suppose, and at least to have a deeper understanding rather than a stereotype of what the other is. And again, the conversation they structure is very much in line with what you're proposing. We structure into our individual conversations with people who differ.
Yeah, yeah, and I'll just add to that a little story, and that is my husband ran for Congress back in 2020. And one of the things he did around the district, and one of his main goals was to try and build bridges and help people see each other in a more humane way across the aisle. And one of the things he did, he held these events all around the district. He called it Pub Democracy. And he brought people together, Republicans and Democrats. And he said, I am not here to pitch a campaign spiel. I'm not here to raise funds. I just want to get you around the table and talking together about the kind of world you want for your children, for yourselves. And it was incredible because Democrats and Republicans sitting there, they come as, mortal enemies at times, and they sit at the table and they realize, oh, we all kind of actually want the same world. We, of course, have some disagreements about how to get there. We have minor disagreements about this and that, but we all want our kids to get a good education. We all want affordable health care. We all want good roads. Like these are just we all want these things. And so sometimes you just have to sit across the table and look the other person in the eye and listen and hear. And I think that goes a long way in diffusing just this incredible toxicity that we've built. And as I mentioned earlier, we are sometimes really angry with people for things that aren't even real, things they don't actually even believe. But you won't know that until you maybe sit down and talk with them.
Hmm. So there's quite a few questions coming in. So I'm going to try to see if we can meld some of these. So Christy, you just mentioned something about, or sorry, David, maybe it was you, the pub talks. So there's a couple conversations about going on about how do you suggest holding these group discussions with people with opposing views? And then if I could kind of tie into that, there's a question that says, trying to find it again, how important it is to hold on to your humanity in these conversations. So I'm sorry, I'm kind of screwing up what the person said, but it's basically, I've heard many characterize those who hold an opposing point of view as educated or simply stupid. So how critical is it to recognize the humanity of those whom we disagree so that the actual constructive dialogue can happen? So maybe if you think about those two together, the group discussions and holding on to the humanity of the conversation.
Sure. And Jennifer, if I could just pick out one element of what you were saying there and what was being voiced in some of these comments. How do we have a conversation with somebody whose views are so radically different from our own? It's so kind of emotionally taxing to try to engage that conversation. And I would just return to where I started, and that is, those probably aren't the people we need to be having a conversation with. The 30% who are locked into their position are not the people that are going to sway the next election. And so I mean, I would treat them as God's children, my fellow humans. I absolutely want to show them grace and have a spirit of humility as I approach those conversations. But I'm not going to spend time on debating on Facebook with somebody from the hard side of the opposite of my own views. It only takes, as I said, 2%. If they switched their votes in the last election, there would be a different history being written right now. So it's finding those who are maybe on the other side from your own views, but not hard so. It's not a question of their identity being locked into that social identity and such that they cannot hear any other view than the one that supports their current identity. Just don't spend time there. Focus where potentially you can be effective.
Yeah.
So I'm going to lump two questions together that I feel are a little, so speaking of, how do you spend your time, should you spend time talking to people? There's a question pointing to, our upcoming elections and doing canvassing. How do you know when someone's persuadable? So if you think they're a low fact information, how do you find that someone is persuadable? How do you identify those for low info people? And then there's another one up here, but why don't we think about that one for a second? So it's basically to what you said.
There has to be conversation. So, I mean,
Mhm.
Christy talked about engaging somebody conversation in the coffee shop. So, I mean, one can approach with a questioning kind of framework. You're curious, you want to understand the other person, you want to understand their views, and sometimes that conversation leads you to appreciate that there's some openness or some tentativeness uh, or some lack of information and openness to education about simple facts. And other times that person is hardcore what they are. And there's just, I mean, you can have a conversation, but there's no point wasting time on a political conversation there because that's not a person whose mind you're going to change.
Yeah. Yeah. And, in terms of how do you approach kind of low information voters, sometimes I think it's a question, well, how is this going for you? Or, getting back to that, well, what kind of world do you want? And whose vision can take us there, and really breaking it down to, if they're not a person who is into data and statistics and absorbing those things, then you can take a story that comes out of the data and the statistics, and sometimes human stories can speak to people. I will say, when we first moved back here, I grew up here, and 10, 11 years ago, we moved back, and we were in Washington, D.C., came back, and I thought, I'm going to have to keep my mouth shut in order to survive this place. And because my views, I grew up very conservative in all the ways. And being out in the world and being exposed to different people and different human realities than the white, middle class, West Michigan, Christian, Republican, sort of place I grew up in, little silo. And when I came back and then I heard some of these attitudes welling up in this place, such as, well, those poor people are poor because they're lazy or they deserve it, then I was able to say, the people in my life who I know who are struggling, who are living under the weight of poverty, are the hardest working people I have ever known in my life. Let me tell you about my neighbors in Washington, D.C., where we live, and, bringing in stories of people working multiple jobs, still suffering under the burden of poverty, who can't get out, who don't have a way out because there are so many systems that are overlapping and holding them down, and who is promoting these systems and who is asking for something different. And, so sharing stories has a way of opening people's mind, or at least cracking open the door to different possibilities and different understandings. Because when I grew up here and lived here, I was a champion for all things conservative. I was loud. I treated people like who I am now quite unkindly. And so I know also I can go to that person who maybe is a low information voter, and I know they're probably voting out of the goodness of their heart. They're doing the best that they know based on what they know and based on their experiences and based on where they live, and a lot of those factors. So sometimes I think stories can, open people to other realities.
And Christy, if I could just affirm something you just said, I love data and statistics, and that's what persuades me. But
Yeah.
you're absolutely right. Most people, their minds grow dull when they read statistics and evidence. Stories are what move people. And that's because of the power of the availability heuristic. So the image of George Floyd with the policeman's knee on his neck, when I saw that, immediately I knew that was an image that was going to capture the public imagination. It was going to ignite a lot of feeling. The Renee Good murder of that policeman shooting those two bullets through an open window directly into her head after she had smiled and told him that she wasn't mad at him. That is a vivid, available image that is going to stick with people and shape people's impressions of the immigrations and customs people and what they're doing right now, even if they would tell us that that's totally unrepresentative of what they're doing in toto. So images and stories do matter. Our ethical responsibility is to have those stories be representative of what we know is true rather than what is false. And so one Afghan immigrant killing a National Guard officer in Washington, D.C., when taken to represent Afghans, or one Somali child care fraudulent person representing all Somalians in Minnesota, that is fraudulent storytelling, and that needs to be challenged on its face with data, I think. But you're right. Stories, particularly vivid, compelling, emotionally connected stories, matter. And I think the Renee Good murder is one that's in the image that's going to be in people's minds for a long time to come.
Yeah. I think the storytelling, it's very powerful, and it's how it moves people out of some rigidity in their mindset. And there were two questions that I think you've loosely answered, which was if you two could give some examples about how to engage people in conversation, that if they were from your different tribe, how would you engage a conversation? And I'm kind of hearing one thing is to tell a story or share an experience. And the other one was, how do you, with people who don't want to believe the data and stats, like you said, David, that can be very dry and people can say, yeah, you can move numbers around, don't worry about it. I think storytelling could be a very powerful way to, kind of stop some rage right at the beginning of a conversation.
And
Jane,
I
how
would
are we
also,
do? Yeah, go ahead, David.
yeah, I would also want to, in a Socratic way, ask some questions that help the other person think. So if we're talking about climate change, and I think, well, this climate change business, I mean, it's cold now, but we've had warm winters, and I think it's kind of a hoax. Well, how would we know whether climate change is happening and it's serious? I mean, would you be interested in knowing, whether climate related gases are accumulated in the atmosphere, whether the Earth's air temperature over time is rising, whether the polar ice caps are stable or melting, whether um, the ice cap in Greenland is stable or melting, whether the seas are rising or not. I mean, these are questions we can ask. And would the answers to these questions help inform our decision about whether this is a serious issue or whether it's a hoax and we should return to mining beautiful coal, beautiful, clean coal?
Jane, how are we doing for time? Do you want to do a couple more questions or do you want to move into close?
I think we have about 5 more minutes, and then we'll wrap it up. Then I will wrap it up. Defer to me for the last few minutes.
Okay, so if you two are up for it, here's another question. So we've been talking about if you're canvassing or, a relative that you suspect is a low info or a low info voter. This question is, how do you engage a highly educated person? So assuming that that, a highly educated person who espouses a completely different narrative.
Oh, that's fun. Because because now we can have a kind of conversation that we academics love to have with each other, where we, in the ideal sense, each with a spirit of humility, engage in the free marketplace of ideas. I present my ideas and evidence, you present yours. We challenge each other, and out of that collective exchange, greater wisdom grows. That's the idea of a college or a university. And so a more educated person is going to be more open to looking at reasoned evidence and data.
Yep.
Very good. And just to let you both know, Erin did say, and the group who might not be looking at chat, Erin did say that she was going to post both of those presentations to a blog.
Yes, this video of the Zoom will be posted to our YouTube channel, which you can always get through the icons on our homepage of our website. It's also
Great.
always on the footer of every email that we send out. And then I also add it to the blog with kind of additional information. So look for that tonight or probably tomorrow.
So I've probably missed some questions in chat. I did try to get them loosely answered. I apologize if I didn't get to your question directly. In that vein, I think Jane's going to give us 2 more minutes. So if somebody just wanted to lob a question in, I would encourage it.
Okay, I'll lob a question. So Erin and I are the curators of our Saugatuck Douglas Area Indivisible Facebook page. Occasionally, we get this crazy misinformation person posting. I usually look to find out who this person is. What are they? Whatever. I sometimes just block them altogether. They can't talk to us anymore. I would like to know what Christy and David think about that approach to a difference of opinion.
Well, and I would add to that I have blocked AI profiles
Bots.
now. There's bots that are just stirring stuff up on Facebook now.
Yeah. 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 So I've done different things. for example, there was someone who, again, I have these sort of complicated abortion views. I don't fit neatly into any party. And um, there was an evangelist from Holland who came on my page and just, it was this really beautiful, thoughtful conversation that was going on. It was long, there was a lot of really thoughtful comments from both sides. And he came on and just started launching into, hellfire and damnation for anyone who wasn't exactly where he was. And I started getting private messages from people who were saying this man is really triggering for me, and it's bringing back all of these horrible things from my childhood and so on from my religious community. And I had kind of enjoyed some banter with him online, quite frankly. I think he always revealed who he was by the horribleness of his statements that he made, actually. And then I would try to respond with kindness and love, and people did see that and take note, but he became a really triggering presence for a lot of people. And the more of these messages I got from people, I decided I'm going to unfriend him because he's not contributing anything. To be fair and honest, the only reason I was okay with him being there was because he was revealing this side of something that was awful. But I did end up blocking him because it was very hurtful and hard for some people to read his words. But generally, I don't. I think I have hid some comments in the past that have been horrible or just filled with, yeah, awful things and untrue things. But yeah.
So I would say just in my own professional life, I've experienced this in a couple of ways. One, I wrote a book entitled, the subtitle, The Christian Case for Gay Marriage. And that naturally elicited a lot of comment, both supportive and people on the other side. And I guess I'm kind of like Christy. For the most part, if somebody's not being toxic, if they're being sincere, they we're both people of faith and we believe in the same scriptures and so forth. I'm open to having a conversation there and at least to respecting their humanity. Also, as the author of an introductory psych book that has gotten a lot of reviews by colleagues and criticism and so forth, I've just learned that if you treat people with respect, even when they don't expect respect, especially when they don't expect respect and appreciation back for your having heard them, that often there's a soft answer turns away wrath, and something good happens out of that conversation. And that comes back to that essay that I posted at the beginning of the chat bar on having difficult conversations. They can often be more fruitful and more gratifying for all parties if we're willing to risk them.
Mm-hmm.
So I realize if somebody's just being mean and hostile and toxic, and that's their only purpose, then that's a different matter.
Yeah.
All right then. Jen, I think I'll go ahead and jump in if this sounds okay with you. Dr. Christy Berghoef and Dr. David Myers, you have given us insights and understanding and yourselves, your humanity, tools to engage, to bring about change and continue to maintain important relationships, even when we're having the tough conversation, to continue to care and see the humanity of the other. That has been such a gift, and we thank you very much. And friends, as you prepare for the weeks ahead, please check our website. There are always new things posted, strategic and important actions for engagement. Jen, I wonder, did you have an announcement about plans to get out the vote? Did you want to say a word or two about that before I completely wrap us up?
Sure. So I'd like to, a member of the steering committee wasn't able to join us tonight, Craig Hudson. He's actually de facto our volunteer coordinator, and he is helming for the time period what we're calling the Get Out the Vote volunteer group. Now, several of you, I hope, have received calls from a phone bank asking how we can engage you more, how to get you interested in, and how to get some action going, basically. And a lot of you responded that you wanted to be part of the Get Out the Vote group. So we wanted to say to you in response to that, that we are starting up, and in the next couple months, we'll be rolling out several efforts. We've been talking about this behind the scenes that involves voter registration, canvassing, and phone banks. And in February, we're going to launch both online and in-person training, canvassing training, that is. I think that's already posted on the events tab as well on our website. So one of the things we want to get across to you right now, as we're getting going with the elections coming up, is that we need to know who you are and you need to know who we are. So I'm going to put an email into chat. It's volunteer@sdaiindivisibles.org. It's a way that you can get a hold of us and we can get back to you. And you can ask us questions there, of course. And then once we're able to confirm dates for training and the actions we will post them on the website and communicate with you directly. So this was just a little quick, snappy FYI, and to let you know that Get Out the Vote and what we can do in action terms is very much on our mind.
Okay, thanks, Jen. So the other things to look ahead, you can anticipate a huge national No Kings 3, which will be and must be the largest ever in this country. We will be planning the protest once the dates are announced, likely toward the end of March or early April. Start working on those signs, folks, because we will be out there. Look ahead to our future programs in which we'll be bringing you candidates that are running for office. There are two Democrats, Diop Harris and Sean McCann, running to challenge Bill Huizenga in the Congressional District 4 race. We will be inviting each one of them to come for an opportunity to explain what they stand for, and we invite your active interaction with them so you can take your best decisions before the August primary. Those will be held during our regular monthly meetings, the third Tuesday of every month. Understanding how we are slipping into a fascist state is critical for resistance and action to save our democracy. We plan to have a program on this important topic on an expert on this in the months coming up. Watch for announcements. Coming up in February, join us for, I love this title, Pizza, Postcards, and People Power on February 4th at the Douglas Bowling Alley. Try not to get too much of your pizza on the postcards. We are paying for the pizza, so come out and join us. And you can find more information about that on our website. On February 7th, there will be a workshop at Satya Yoga, which is run by Kat Van Hammond, on cultivating peace, which will give us direct experience and some tools we can use to maintain our own steadiness and peace during these chaotic times. If we want to respond with the grace and care that our speakers tonight have shared with us, we need to find a way to quiet our own souls and find an inner peace, and she will help us with that. So watch for an email on how you can join and check out our website for more information. And finally, please donate to support our work. There's a link for donations on our website, SDAindivisible.org. And Hector already put up the website connection. Thank you, Hector. Most of all, thank you for being here, bringing your best selves into this work. It has been a joy to be with you all tonight, and thank you.
Thank you all so much for joining. I just want to say we had almost 100 people here tonight, which is amazing. And we always stream our meetings via Zoom. We always have a Zoom option. So if you can't come to the meeting, you can always join via Zoom, and we always post it to our YouTube channel and our website after. So you can always watch them after the fact. If you didn't see the one on Christian nationalism, it was really, really good. So thank you all so much for joining. Appreciate having you all here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And if you are on your way out, I did put up a couple of questions there just to give us feedback on the meeting. If you could reply a little bit before you leave, just on how you found this meeting and if Zoom worked out for you.
Good night, all.
Thanks.
Thank you both so much for your speeches. Were really fantastic. So enlightening, so informative.
Great.
Jane, did Larry find anybody showing up?
He's downstairs on his iPad. I'm gonna go check. Hey, Lair, down there. No, so I'm gonna check and see if anybody showed up in this snowstorm. I hope not. I hope they read their information. But
Right.
anyway, my dearly beloveds, I will be seeing most of you later.
Right.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank
Good
you.
night.